Do you think it's necessary to date in high school?
I'm going to say yes. I want kids to have some opportunity in high school. They don't have to have a long-term boyfriend or girlfriend, but some experience of asking a person out. Just even carrying the conversation at dinner. That's a huge challenge for a lot of boys. If I had a quarter for every time I'd heard a boy say, I didn't know what to say.
If I had a quarter for every date I went on where I was never asked one question.
Here it is.
Yes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Paula Farah Show. I'm your host, Paula, and I try to admit when I'm wrong, and I got this one wrong. Or I don't know if it was so much that I got it wrong, but had a total change of heart about teen dating and whether our teenagers should date after having this conversation with therapist Sissy Goff and David Thomas. So all month long, I'm bringing back some of our hottest topics, most downloaded conversations from 2025 that continue to be big themes going into 2026. And this conversation with Sissy and David stopped me in my tracks because for so long, I was anti-teen dating, didn't think there was a real need for it. But wait until you hear what David and Sissy have to say and why it's necessary. So this conversation was totally listener-driven because so many of you have questions about teens and dating. We talk about when should teens start dating? What's the purpose of dating in high school? What are your big concerns? Some healthy boundaries? How much authorities do parents have over who their kids date? Again, pretty much all listener-driven questions in this particular episode. We talk about why kids aren't getting asked out anymore or why they're engaging in risky behavior. But mainly, we dig into why dating might be necessary. We're going to explain, I promise. I know it sounds a little weird, but without further ado, this conversation about teen dating and why it's actually necessary with David Thomas and Sissy Goff. Enjoy. Sissy and David, I can't tell you how much response we have had from our listeners collectively and viewers about this topic of teen dating. And because it's a tough one, I have a candle lit. You have your dog with you.
We have a dog.
We have some
Patches.
therapy.
We're all prepared.
Yep. We're ready.
We are. And I know that the two of you, this is probably a very prevalent topic in your counseling sessions. We're very much living it with a 17 and 15 and 11-year-old. So we need all the help over here in our house. And I know our listeners and viewers collectively can't wait for us to dive into this topic. So as we talk about teen dating, we decided, the three of us, that we're going to divide this into kind of like 5 overarching themes, all based on the questions that we got. And you guys, I couldn't believe how many questions we got.
I couldn't either.
And amazing questions.
Yes.
Really good questions. It just goes to show you how unsettling it is and how we're like parents are craving answers to a lot of these questions. So the big themes, number 1, when should they start dating? Number 2, what is the purpose of dating, especially in high school? Number 3, I want to know, and we want to know your big concerns as therapists about the dating scene with teens today. Number 4, what are healthy boundaries? And number 5, how much authority or input do parents really have over who their kids date and the whole process? So let's jump into it. The most popular question that we all got, Sissy and David, was, what is the ideal age to start dating? I know I've read the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends 16. What do you guys recommend?
Well, I'm going to go ahead and start off and say my 6-year-old nephew has already started and is proposing actually to girls in the swimming pool regularly. That's his chosen place of proposal. And yeah, so I'll just start there. David, what would you add?
He's getting a jump start on his
He
game.
is.
You're really
It's a little Casanova.
but multiple.
Multiple. Yes.
Oh.
I would start out, Paula, by saying I wholeheartedly agree with the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation. And I think I talk so often when it comes to boys, parents of boys, to think about dating like driving. And if we stay with that analogy for a moment, we know that we didn't accidentally choose 16 as the age for a kid to get their license, 15 for a permit, but we decided collectively on that because we believe there's enough brain development on board to handle that kind of significant opportunity and responsibility. Now, are they fully prepared at 16? No, of course not. But enough brain development on board to develop skills that would equip them to be more, quote unquote, ready for that. So I think there's some wisdom if we think about those two opportunities being big opportunities for kids.
That's really good. And Sissy, what would you add to that? Like when you say 16, and by the way, you can get your full license at 15 here in South Carolina, and I think in South Dakota 14. So maybe the rules are different in our states. But Sissy, what would you add to that? At age 16, my parents didn't let me date till I was 16, but even when I was 16, they're like, you can't single date, you still have to double date. So what kind of restrictions or boundaries, what does dating look like at 16? What would you add to that?
I love that idea. I mean, I think even thinking about cars, kind of using that training wheels approach, and they start in groups and then they move to double dating and then they move to single dating. And Paula, as David was talking, I was thinking about just girls that I have counseled in the last couple of years, and I'm not hearing girls dating. I am either hearing girls that their only dates are homecoming, prom, winter formal.
Wow.
That's it. Or they're engaging in risky behavior with boys because they're not getting any attention. And so it feels like the extremes are so wide that I think the more we can move toward a healthy approach, I really feel concerned that we're not teaching kids healthy intimacy, which I know we're going to talk more about and what that looks like gradually over time.
Yeah, you talked about one of your concerns, and we'll get to that bucket in a little bit, about confusing intimacy with intensity, right? Confusing those two.
Yes.
Okay, so what are we? I think it might be different for every family. Like, when do you stop chaperoning? Is that just so? So, are you saying like group dates starting at 16, or is there anything that you can do before
I think you can start group dates before 16.
Okay.
Certainly. And, you know, if a group of them goes to the movie, go to and sit a couple rows behind where you can keep an eye on everybody.
Right.
But yes, I think you can start group dates before 16. What do you think, Paula? What's your perspective?
My kids, like my 15-year-old who's in 9th grade, he couldn't care less about having a girlfriend right now. He's so focused on basketball. Like, and I know that's one of your big things, David, with boys, like that age, you want them like exhausted from athletics and activities, right? That's him. I mean, all he cares about is basketball and maybe a little bit is academics. So he couldn't care less right now. Our daughter is 17 and she has a boyfriend, and she wasn't really interested until like last year. So this wasn't something that we necessarily had to navigate. But even so, we had some prerequisites. You got to come meet us and talk to us. Like, I'm sorry, if he is worthy of taking you out on a date, he has to have the chutzpah and the courage to come meet us face to face,
Paula.
a conversation. We're kind of traditional that way. Like, you got to come meet us and talk to us. And we did prefer like nothing, like, yes, you could ride in the car with him, but try to meet up with other people as you're getting to know one another. She didn't have a boyfriend when she was young. So this isn't anything that we had to necessarily navigate. A lot of our listeners are wondering like that age 12, that age 13 when they have boyfriends, like what's appropriate, buying gifts, what's appropriate at age 12, 13. And then we'll get to your 6-year-old nephew and what we're going to do about him. he's an anomaly. Yes, he's a little Casanova.
He is, yes. So 12 and 13, what's appropriate?
Yes.
I think I would say, I don't know that they need to be group dating at 12 and 13, but can they be using your cell phone to text a little bit or on their iPad where you are checking everything? I think it's really harmless. Most of the reports I get from parents who are concerned about their kids being interested in someone, and a lot of parents will say, we're not calling it dating. You can call it spending time together or hanging out.
That. That's good.
Yes, we don't need to call it that yet. But, the texts are like, hey, what are you doing? That's the extent of it.
Yes.
There's not a lot of concerning things happening typically. And if there are at 12 and 13, then I think we want to dig deeper into what might be going on to drive that need for connection, attention.
Yeah.
Okay. So would you add anything to that, David? So you're saying no group dates, but like what if they want to hang out at one another's house? You're saying no to that. Like, you don't need to be going to the movies together, but you can text one another and you can talk on the phone.
Here's what I'd say to that. I think if we think about the larger category of dating, just one-on-one, I think 16 could be a great benchmark for that. I think a lot of middle schools, for example, are going to host homecoming dances that give kids an opportunity to ask someone. And I think that's great and fantastic. And if we were to think about a larger category of building relationships and the skills needed within those relationships, those are great opportunities for kids. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I've had a lot of parents, Paul, over the years who, have said, you can't have a girlfriend until you're in high school. And then he announces as a seventh grader he has a girlfriend, and the parents are, deeply troubled by that. And my challenge to them, has been kind of back to the driving piece. It's like, he can't drive himself anywhere. So it's fine if he wants to call her his girlfriend,
Right.
because he needs your permission to go anywhere to see her. The most that
Totally.
could happen is them connecting at school. And I wouldn't die on that hill of saying she's not your girlfriend, she's
Right.
not your girlfriend, when the reality is we can't control the time they spend together at school, but
Right.
we have some control over the time they spend outside of school.
That's
And
good.
if we're thinking in that larger category of building relationships, that's a great thing we want kids to be doing just in terms of their social development all
So good.
throughout.
And co-ed birthday parties at your house feel different to me than just letting them go to the mall, a group
I like
wandering
that.
around in middle school. It is. It's a great opportunity to practice. And I meet with a lot of girls who are in single-sex schools. And so the parents just say they have no exposure to boys. And I think
Mhm.
especially in those scenarios, it's great for them to interact in ways
Yeah.
where we have eyes on and can keep
Yes. Yeah.
people watching what's going on.
My boys, when we lived in New York, went to an all-boys school, and it was so precious because they had their uniforms. But yes, that you make a great point. And I think that leads beautifully to, the second overarching theme of what is the purpose of dating. I like what both of you just said. It's an opportunity to get to know one another, to gain social skills, to get to know a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And I think we put so much expectation on dating. I've heard people that say only date to marry, but I'm like, that is way too much pressure to put on a 16 or 17-year-old. So this may be the unpopular, opinion here, but do you date to marry? Like, what is the purpose of dating in high school?
We may have different opinions on that. I don't know, but
I love it too.
and Paula, Dave and I we're the same age, and we're really old, and so
Wait. I'm probably older than you all.
I don't know.
Certainly not.
I don't think
Wait,
so.
What
No.
year were you all born? Are we allowed to talk about that?
We can.
My grandmother said not to, but sure.
75.
70.
Yeah.
Okay, so barely.
Well,
Barely.
we were of the age though where you dated a lot. I mean, I literally in college remember having a day where I had 3 dates in one day because we had
Hello,
Coke dates and lunch dates and
No
all
wonder
the
your
things.
nephews asked out in the court. Genetically loaded.
No.
That's so great.
But I mean, I think it was so good. It was so good to get to know a lot of different people. And I think along the way, when you're dating, you're getting a sense of what's out there and the kind of person that you want to be with
Wow.
for the rest of your life. And I know we're going to come back to the intensity and intimacy, but I think for girls in particular today, if they are dating, they're serious relationships, which we know is then when we get more concerned about, sexual intimacy between them. And so I think casual dating is a great thing for kids, personally.
Do you think it's necessary to date in high school?
I'm going to say yes, but can I say why?
Yes. Of course you
And
can.
and when I say dating, I would at least want, I challenge a lot of parents of boys that I want him to ask out a girl to at least 2 homecomings and at least 1 prom. Like that's
Okay.
kind of the bare minimum
Benchmark.
so that he's getting enough practice. I go back to the driving analogy. It would be, in my mind, the equivalent of sending him to college having never been on the interstate. And we don't want that to happen for the first time when he's in another state and trying to learn these skills and we can't offer oversight and input. So if he's had some practice while he's still on our watch, we can give input to that. And he's then having a lot of opportunity to develop these skills that all 3 of us know are going to be necessary for the rest of these kids' lives. And
Right.
so I would say I want kids to have some opportunity in high school. They don't have to have a long-term boyfriend or girlfriend, but some experience of asking a person out, just even carrying the conversation at dinner. That's a huge challenge for a lot of boys. If I had a
So
quarter for every
good.
time I'd heard a boy say, I didn't know what to say.
If I had a quarter for every date I went on where I was never asked one question.
There it is.
Yes.
And so it's these mechanics that are part of that skill development we want them to have.
Yeah.
Okay, can I add something for girls, though, that I feel like is really important? Again, because I am seeing so many amazing girls who are never asked out. Even into college are never asked out. And so, and I will never forget sitting with a 7th grade girl who I think her mom had some issues going on, freshly divorced, I think was on a search. And this girl said to me, well, my mom and I, we just need a guy in our lives. I remember thinking, that is the message you're getting from your mom. And it's going to be really hard for me to undo that messaging. And so I think as we're thinking about girls, I mean, unless you feel comfortable with your daughter asking boys out, which I'm kind of old school on that kind of thing, there's not as much in their control. And so I want us to be very breezy, very aware of how we talk about that with girls. Like, it's fine if there's, as she gets to the age we feel comfortable with her dating, it's fine if you want to go out with somebody. And it's also fine if you don't, because boys are really silly and about 5 years behind you with maturity. And so they may not get there yet. I just think we want to normalize both because, like I said, I'm seeing less girls date than ever before in 30 years of counseling girls.
So David, do you believe that dating in high school is only for marriage? It sounds like no.
I don't. Now, I think we could create a category of dating quality that, again, pulling back to seeing this within a skill set within their social development, teaching kids what it looks like to pursue quality people, quality friendships, quality dating. So if we were to attach that word to it, I think that objective is maybe more helpful than only date someone you'd marry. So that
I love that.
Feels like this enormous burden. So it's like, I want to make sure you're developing a lot of discernment. So you just pick quality people to be in relationship with.
That's so good. A couple of moms were concerned because you love that driving analogy, because their kids are essentially getting on the interstate without any experience. One mom said, my son's a senior in high school, hasn't dated. Should I be concerned? Another one said, what about a kid who's not interested in dating? Another one said, is it normal for my 18, 19-year-old to not be interested in dating? Another mom said, what to do if they don't date before they go to college so I don't have a chance to observe her with a boy and give her direction and advice, not that she's going to listen. Is it
I love that ending.
Kids, like, do you want, like, what about kids that aren't interested in dating or haven't dated in high school and they're going off to college? They're hopping on that interstate and they don't have that experience yet.
You go first.
No, I would just say we're seeing, this is to your point. If we go back to driving, I sat with a girl yesterday in my office who said, I know I'm 16, but I'm not ready to drive yet. I'm too fearful. And we could spend a long time talking about anxiety and I know before. And I think that is hindering a lot of kids, and they may need more support and challenge in this area than we would have needed. I mean, again, it's just a different culture and a different world.
Yeah. And I think too, Paula, to Sissy's great point, I think the fear, and we'll talk a little more in a few minutes about risk with boys, but the fear, I think, will stand in the way so much so that they will argue down not wanting to do this, not wanting to develop these skills, not wanting to participate in any way because the fear is so significant, and making an argument of, why do I need to? Like, why are you requiring me to ask someone out at this point, convincing us that this is really not helpful. But if we, again, keep pulling back, it's not about boy-girl relationships, it's about skill development. And I want you to feel equipped. You're going to have female coworkers someday. I want you to feel really confident and competent in conversation with them, in working through conflict with them, in talking about hard things with them. So all of what comes within that I think just is necessary. And to Sissy's great point a few minutes ago, every developmental theorist would agree that boys finish adolescence somewhere around 22 to 25. And for girls, it's 19 to 20. So he's going to be slower in the skill development. And thinking about that endpoint, if we're not pushing some in the 15 to 18 space, he could hit the end of adolescence and really be missing some foundational skills.
Right. I think what I'm hearing the two of you say, too, is if we change the expectations, instead of date to marry, but date to pursue quality people and to develop certain social skill set, which is really important. If we change those expectations, maybe kids wouldn't be so risk averse, or maybe they wouldn't put this off. But as you said, it's an important skill development. And look, we're children of the 70s. So how has dating changed? How are kids even dating today? How has it changed since we were dating back in the 1900s, as my children say?
One change, and it's linked to a concern I have, is, for us not having access to technology, the only possibility of a girl that I could ask out would be someone I went to school with or someone I met through an activity. Whereas now I have kids meet people they've never laid eyes on, and then develop quote unquote a relationship and then get asked out by that person. And that feels concerning to me because think about the baby steps that happened before the asking out. We sat in class next to each other. We had an awkward glance. All the different parts and pieces
we
that
passed notes.
There
Yes.
it is. That were some building blocks to making the ask, I think, a little more doable, that I have some concerns around that. What would you
Yeah.
say?
Well, I would add, for boys' sake, one thing that I think has changed as we're thinking about expectations, and Paula, I'm curious where you are if this is happening, but now an invitation to prom is the equivalent of what I think a real proposal was back when we were kids.
Yes, the promposals.
Yes. I feel so sad for kids, the amount of pressure. And I can't imagine on the boys, but even the girls, I think, get really anxious about it. And their moms will prep them when the boy's coming over and they have to look a certain way. I mean,
Oh my
all of that
gosh.
stuff.
Yes,
I think there is it was wonderful how casual it was when we were
Yes.
growing up. And I mentioned, it's a silly thing, but I went to the University of Arkansas. Sorry about that. I know we're competitors.
It's okay. That's all right. We're good.
Okay,
We're good.
we all three are, but we'll still be friends. But one of my favorite things we did literally were called Coke dates. Because it was in the middle of the afternoon. It was like a coffee date, but you would go get a Coke with someone. So it was like a 45-minute.
Coca-Cola.
You'd go get a Coca-Cola. It was a 45-minute date, almost to see if it was someone you would want to go out on another date with.
Yes, that's great.
And that gradual entering in, almost like wading in the water. How do we do that more gradually and more casually? Because again, there's I think the either intense serial or the lack of any is probably an offshoot to some degree of the intensity we put just on the idea.
Right. I love the idea of a Coke date and how casual. And it's a 45-minute date. It doesn't have to linger. Once the Coke is finished, or the Pepsi, right?
Yes.
If you're a Pepsi girl, I'm a Coke girl. Maybe
Yay.
Coke would want to sponsor this. But anyway, I think that's a great segue into our third overarching point. So we talked about, what's the appropriate date, age. We've talked about what's the purpose. Let's dig into now some of your concerns as therapists about teen dating. And I continue to hear themes from you, Sissy, about girls not getting asked out or confusing intensity with intimacy. And for you, David, the things you're hearing and seeing on a very real and daily basis, boys aren't taking risks, right? Or they're getting way too emotionally attached and making threats, right? Whoever wants to start, what are some of your big concerns that you're seeing right now regarding teen dating?
I sure want you to say your concerns as a parent of teens, too.
I do, too.
My concerns, that they're not taking the risk. Like I said, my middle guy is more interested in basketball, but I want him to take risks and put himself out there. I want it to be awkward and weird, right? I want him to develop those social skills. And also, like you say, David, you want boys to take risks, and they're not taking as many risks. For my daughter, some of our big challenges, healthy boundaries, right? What happens if, and we've had great experiences so far. She's brought some really sweet boys home. She's got a serious boyfriend right now. But what happens when his parents have different boundaries than we do as parents, and overstepping that, the physical aspect of it, because it seems like every kid is having sex these days, right? Even if they come from a faith-filled home, whether they're Jewish or, Christian or Muslim. So boundaries are probably my big concern as a parent with my daughter. With my son, it's not taking risks. So and my 11-year-old, he says he doesn't want a girlfriend for a long time. So I don't
tell
know.
him he doesn't
He's
need
seeing
one.
his older sibling. And I'm fine with that.
Good.
So we've had a very positive, I would say, positive experiences so far, but I hear from so many of my friends, and we've had our moments where I'm checking her phone and checking her snaps, and we'll get into that a little bit, how much can we how much should we be checking in on them? How much should we just be trusting them? The open and honest communication. I don't want to necessarily be her friend right now, but I do want to she's going to have to make her decisions, and she's also going to have to deal with some of those consequences of the decisions, but we're there to love her, right? So,
yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to just word vomit on you guys.
No, we wanted you to
But it's a
share.
lot.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a lot,
helpful.
and it's different than when I dated. And again, I came from a real strict home. But we're a little bit more lax than my family was, but it's also a different time. And like you said, kids are meeting, online and like, oh, I want to go meet up with this kid. And when we're in Atlanta, which is a couple hours away, I'm like, how'd you meet him? On Snap. So it's totally different.
Yeah.
But I want to know some of your concerns too. And then I can kind of like weigh in on those.
Yeah. Well, I can jump in first in that intensity versus intimacy. That is something our friend Melissa, who started Daystar, said a long time ago. And it feels like to me it has only become more true over time. And part of it, Paula, and I know we've talked about this before, but kids today are using very intense language emotionally. And so, I think about when I was growing up, even with my friends, I might say, my parents are separated, or I'm having a hard time about blank, but I wasn't getting in to the depth of talking about emotion with peers like kids are now. And in some ways, that's healthy and wonderful that they're doing it. What I'm seeing happen with girls is they are jumping into the deep end with boys emotionally and sharing very deep parts of who they are, deep struggles that they have. And the boys are as well.
Yes.
And then it becomes, I think emotionally they get entangled in a way. I remember somebody saying when I was in college, don't pray with someone you're dating because it develops too much intimacy, which, I think it was probably a win if you were dating someone who would pray with you, really.
My daughter and her boyfriend are doing a Bible study right now. So
That's awesome. That is awesome.
About that.
Yeah, no, I think it was a silly rule. But I think the danger of developing that kind of emotional intimacy with a boy that you're hoping to date, which is certainly happening, and a boy you've been dating for 6 months to a year is, the more intimate we become, the harder it is to separate. And that is true. Obviously, we know that sexually. And I think one of my concerns is I still don't think we're doing a great job of talking about the ramifications of intimacy sexually with kids emotionally, how it impacts them emotionally.
Are we talking about sexual intimacy, which then becomes, it's hard to disentangle and it becomes the emotional intimacy? That's what you're concerned about?
I think it's almost like the two are tied together. Okay. And the more emotional intimacy that develops, the harder it is to not have the sexual intimacy.
Yes. I gotcha. Okay.
And then we're inextricably linked to this person in a lot of ways. And so then I don't know the statistics on people who date in high school and get married, but I don't think it's very high.
Right.
And so then I am watching these girls who have had this very intimate, physical, or even just emotional relationship with boys that are just rushed when the relationship ends. And so I think teaching kids the appropriate pacing of relationships in this day and time emotionally is really important.
Yes.
That's really good. Okay. Pacing.
What would you say?
I love that language. I would say, Paul, those two concerns you named are my biggest concern and feel like extremes. On the one end, a boy is so overwhelmed by the idea of asking a girl out, he's just avoiding it altogether. And Sissy has this great definition she put in her books on anxiety, which is that anxiety is an overestimation of the problem and an underestimation of myself. So the problem or the situation feels too big, I feel too small. And I think a lot of boys feel that about dating. And I've known a lot of boys who've confessed to me, David, I was so nervous. I didn't just feel nauseous. I threw up. I either threw up before I picked her up. I threw up in the restaurant when I couldn't figure out how to move the conversation forward. I threw up in the bathroom at the dance, and it's this sense of the experience in some way feels so overwhelming and unfamiliar, which is why I keep going back to the driving analogy and the skill development. Like the only way it will become familiar is the practice. I wish there were a workaround, but I want him to have to work through I feel so sick about fill in the blank, whatever that circumstance may be. And if it's dating, that would be getting in the way. And I think we could spend a lot of time talking about technology that I think is the experience of gaming, and how many adolescent boys, I think, spend a lot of time with a headset on, makes it less enticing to pursue any relationships, not just a relationship with a girl, but even friends. It's like, why would I want to organize us getting together when I can just talk to my friends through a headset? And we don't have to be in the same room together.
Yeah.
Oh, and I remember a boy saying to me, it's easier to kill a dragon on a video game than ask a girl out.
There it is.
Wow. It is. But a lot of parents will say, oh, well, they're gaming with their friends. So they're talking, they're verbalizing. But face-to-face interpersonal communication is totally different. And I remember the two of you telling me that. And ever since then, because I had it in my mind, oh, my boys, like they're playing with their cousin in Indiana or they're talking with their friends. And I justified it. And after you emphasized how important it is, yes, you can game, but you have to have boundaries. You cannot learn those interpersonal communicative skills and talking and navigating a room and reading a room by being online. So there has to be boundaries. So that was a really,
there it is.
I learned that from you guys. So thank you.
Oh, you're kind to say that.
Okay.
And you're 100% correct. I'm so grateful for you to highlight that for parents to be reminded because, research would say 70 to 80% of all communication is nonverbal. And I can't read the nonverbal with a headset on. Like I have to be looking at your body, looking at your eyes, looking at your face, reading all those things to fully understand all of what you're communicating. And that would be the risk side. I share the same concerns that Sissy does about the entanglement of intimacy and intensity, and where I've seen a lot of boys who haven't had a lot of practice with the Coke date analogy that Sissy talked about, getting into a relationship with a girl, and she becomes not just his girlfriend, but his therapist, I could fill in the blank with a lot of things. And he's, to her point, oversharing, and he's requiring her to carry an emotional weight that was never hers to carry. And I've known more boys than I could count who've sent what I would call hostage crisis text to a girl, like, I need you to call me back right now. If you don't, I'm not sure I can go on.
Or I'm going to hurt myself.
There it is.
Yes. Oh. We both have counseled probably dozens of that scenario.
And it's that intensity and it's desperation. And it's, as Sissy said, it's too much. And that's where I love her word pacing, that I think is a part of where I'm excited we're about to talk about offering some oversight to the equation so that, again, we're pacing and there's skill development happening along the way so that we're playing the long game and thinking, where do we want kids to be by this point?
So how should we, as parents, encourage our kids to have healthy emotional intimacy? A couple of moms, these are their concerns. How do I encourage my son to not say, I love you to everybody? How do I guide him as he moves fast from girl to girl because he, quote, lost feelings? My kids don't date. They just hang out or hook up. How do you encourage them to have face-to-face as opposed to texting? How do you support teens that struggle with attachment and seek it in dating? Like, what about all of those concerns? I think they're kind of overarching concerns and fall into some of your concerns that you just articulated.
I went to a continuing education seminar years ago on frenemies about girls, which I loved. And one of the things that the presenter talked about, which I thought was really cool, was a bullseye in terms of relationships. And, strangers are the outside of the bullseye, then acquaintances, then friends, and then best friends. And one of the things she said about girls that I think is certainly true, that girls put best friend expectations on acquaintances, which is a different topic, kind of. But I think it does cross over into romantic interests. And even that, I think, could be a cool analogy to use with kids to say, let's talk about the kind of things that you talk about and that you say to people who are in your acquaintance realm. And how do we even know when they move to from friend to best friend or acquaintance to friend? And what kind of things do you talk about with them? And, each one, expectations, conversations. When do you say I love you? I mean, I just think even if they seem annoyed, we need to be having these conversations with them. And you can blame us. I heard these two therapists and this amazing person named Paula that I love on a podcast. And here is what they said. Are you seeing this? Like, what do you think helps? I think anytime with adolescents, we can ask their opinion and what they're seeing in their friends, even if they're really talking about themselves. We'll call them friends.
Right, exactly.
And, what do you think would help that situation? And see if you can kind of figure out more of what's going on that way. And then after you do a whole lot of listening, then give your opinion.
Right.
And talk about that pacing idea.
David, it seems like with boys, it's like they're either not taking risks or they're going way too deep.
Yes.
Like where's that? How can we encourage our boys to have healthy emotional relationships? Like, how do we foster that? What does it look like? Is it what Sissy just said, asking these questions? And also, like, I want to know if my boy is sending these threatening text
Yes.
messages too. Like, that's
Yes.
really disturbing.
Yes. And, I've talked a lot, Paula, big picture about adolescence for boys being, in my experience, more clumsy than clean.
Mhm.
Like more fumbling the ball and carrying the ball down the
Yes.
field. And that's just normal. And
Yeah.
and because that's the case, within this category, we can almost expect it's going to be clumsy at time, which means he is going to text some things that we'd prefer he didn't. It's where it thrilled me earlier when you talked about reading text. And that's a controversial topic, I think, for a lot of parents. And kids would certainly understandably argue that's an invasion of my privacy. But I'd go right back to the driving analogy. And the reason we do the permit year, where parents in the car with the kid giving input, is because you haven't developed these skills yet. You haven't learned this yet. And so the same is true in this space. We can't expect kids to know how to communicate well on text when they've never had that experience. And then if they've had that experience with friends, but they've not with the opposite sex. I had a hilarious mom say to her son, middle school son, he texted some things to a girl, and she's like, "Oh, sweetheart, that's a little bit like burping and farting in front of a girl. Like that just never, it goes over well with them. I get why your buddies would think that's funny. Like you just sent some emojis that were real dumb." And so it was this great coaching she was doing within the realization of he learned how to text with his buddies. He sent some memes that were hilarious to a 7th grade boy that for this girl weren't the least bit funny. And so I think seeing it in that way of, I'm here to give you some guidance. I'm okay if you feel like you don't need that. We talk so much with parents about it's always our job to set and hold boundaries with kids. It's always their job to push against them. Like that's normal to development.
Yeah.
And this is a category within that.
I want to talk about boundaries, but before we do, I got to ask you guys about sex. Let's talk about sex and teens. And so I came from a very conservative Christian home. My mom and dad, were like, sex is good, sex is great, save it for your permanent mate. But there was so much shame attached to sex. Now, I want to have healthy conversations about with my kids about it, that look, it's an adult decision. You're going to make your own decision, and I'll love you regardless. But you have to understand there are emotional ramifications, not just physical. You might end up. And, my daughter has some friends who are with boys, and they continue to be with those boys because they're emotionally attached because of the physical aspect, even though those boys don't treat their girl very well. And so I'm trying to have these conversations with my daughter. She's going to make her own decision. I want her to know there's no shame. I will love her. But if she decides to pursue that, then she has to be ready to deal with those consequences too. So how do we have a healthy conversation with our teens about sex? Because it does, and let's just be real, even in the faith circles, kids are having sex these days. I mean, we have to address the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I would say you have a healthy relationship just like that.
Yes.
Healthy conversations just like that. Paula, that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That is what I would encourage every parent to do.
I was thinking the same thing. Go back and listen to the last 5 minutes of what we just talked about.
Yes, hit the
Write down what you heard Paula saying.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, no. Oh.
And, we talk so much about establishing yourself as a source early on with kids. You can always ask me any question. I'm always going to tell you the truth, age appropriately, we know.
Right.
And then that way you're continuing to have dialogue about it, and there's not shame around it in really significant ways, which I feel certain you have done with your kids.
Yeah. And that's the thing I felt like growing up in the type of environment I did, there was a lot of shame attached to it. And we know, like you said, it's going to be more clumsy than clean. Their brains aren't fully developed. They're going to do stuff that's not smart. But I want to be there on the other side of it. But I also want to help inform his or her decision that, look, this is your choice. There's things that, God wants you to do, right? We want you to honor God with your body and all of that, but it's your choice. We'll love you no matter what. But just know that if you decide to do this, there are some very real consequences on the other side. And it might be staying with somebody that's not right for you because you're too emotionally attached. Yeah. So I don't know. It's uncomfortable to talk about it, but it's happening. So we have to address it and address it in a realistic way too. So But thank you for that, you guys. I'm already uncomfortable. And when I'm uncomfortable and nervous, I start to just ramble and I feel like I've done that. So let's move on to boundaries.
No. Well, can I add one thing that's one of my favorite things I ever had a mom do? As she was talking about sex with her daughter, she said, okay, here's what we're going to do because we both feel uncomfortable with this conversation. So we're going to sit back to back and we're going to pretend like we're someone else. So you just say, let's say, Mom, there was someone who, and then I'll say, okay, let's talk about that someone. And so it not only was silly and fun for them, but they weren't looking at each other. They were talking about it in third person. I always just thought that was such a sweet, fun way to have one of the conversations.
Yeah, and Sissy and David, you both said having conversations in the car. So that there's not the direct, especially with boys, because that feels a little too vulnerable for boys. Yes. That's why boys open up at night when the lights are off and they can't see you. But like side to side, shoulder to shoulder conversation, that's really great too. Okay, so let's talk boundaries. I have a ton of questions about boundaries. And I've already told you, we're kind of old school traditional, like you got to come meet us, you got to talk to us and spend time with us, because if you're going to date our daughter, you're going to be with our family a lot too. So how do you encourage boundaries? You talked about that target, like what are appropriate boundaries? How often should they see each other? Should they be referring to one another as you're my bestie? Like, is that even a healthy boundary right there? But let's start with how often should they see one another and spend time with one another outside of school even?
Well, I think we would both say for the more serious relationships among kids, it feels like they lose friendships so much of the time that they just immerse themselves in this relationship. And years ago, I was seeing a girl who was doing that, and her mom and I talked about putting up a boundary that was basically, you can see him one night per weekend. And that's it. Maybe, during the week, maybe once or twice, but we're not doing that much during the week anyway, because you have to study. So once a weekend. And then that way she had this night open that she was much more likely to spend time with friends, because again, we know this boy is likely not permanent. And the girls, we all grew up with girls who ditched all their friends for boys. And it's very hard to move back into the friendship once you have turned your back on them. And I think even with that, helping girls understand the importance of maintaining friendships and why as they're moving into deeper relationships and respecting those friendships.
Like, how do we tactically, I can say it's important you maintain friendships, but like, how do I actually have that conversation and navigate that? What is the importance? And I could kind of speak from it, but like, I'd love for you to give me some words around it.
Well, I love what you just said. I can speak from it. I think when we can say, I remember, and I could say this, a story about my own life. I remember a friend that I really hurt her feelings because she liked a boy and I started dating him and I shouldn't have. And it makes me sad now when I think about it. And why? I think something like that where it feels real instead of I read it out of a book about dating and teens or listened to it on a podcast, or I knew a girl who blank, or even what have you seen with your friends? What have you noticed?
That's
and
good.
What do you feel like is important?
That's really good.
I love that you are interested in this guy. What do you want to do? What do you think would be good to maintain your friendships and to help them know that they're still just as important to you?
David, what about you? Like those healthy boundaries and how much time they spend together with, and how to maintain those friendships with their guy friends or their girlfriends at the same time.
Yes. Which, again, is foundational to their social development in adolescence. So for boys to not be hanging with their guy friends would be the equivalent of only eating protein and never having vegetables or fruits. Like, I need all those things
now you're
as
talking
a part
to
of
all
my diet.
perimenopausal and menopausal. So, sorry.
Well, and you know what I'm thinking as we're even using that analogy, because I love the rule of thumb Sissy threw out about one night per weekend. I think that's a great one. I had a mom of 3 boys years ago who said the way they created boundaries and balance was they had a rule of family, friends, girls, and you had to do equal parts of all 3 over the course of a weekend. That was kind of the equation that they worked within.
Mm-hmm.
And it was her way of not only setting boundaries around the relationship with a girlfriend, but saying, you need this balance even in your married life. Like, she was saying to them, I love your dad and I need my girlfriends. Like, I'm so thankful for our relationship, and that needs to be a part of my life as well. And so I think there's this great modeling of balance that's happening within the setting of the boundaries that I think boys need a lot. Otherwise, back to the hostage crisis text, every boy that I've seen wade into those waters, I would have absolutely said was out of balance in having time with his guy friends. And I'm not saying that would have kept that from happening, but I would have been curious if he had a more balanced life where he was with friends, would he have been putting that much on one girl? But because they were spending so much time together all the time, that relationship just became consuming.
Yeah, that's so good. It's almost like a rule of thirds.
Yes.
Family, friends, and your significant other. That's 30, 30, 30, although that equals, so 33, whatever, the rule of thirds. I love that.
And then you get family time in the mix, which is really nice.
Yes, and that's good. And then if the family time, and like, I love it when my daughter invites her boyfriend over, and he loves our family. He loves the boys.
Of course he does.
Sisters, so it's healthy for them to spend time with the family. And if that can overlap, I love that too. But what are some healthy boundaries with phone and text use? Because when we were growing up, I remember being so nervous having those initial calls. I would write out things to talk about on the phone with boys because like you said, the boys were nervous and throwing up in the bathroom at the dates. I kind of felt like that too because I wasn't sure how to navigate these conversations, but I was building those social skills. But it was a phone and it was attached to the wall and my parents could overhear it. It's different now with phones that go into their bedrooms and they're texting and they have social media. So what are some healthy boundaries for us? No phones in your bedroom overnight. That's just a hard, fast rule we make.
Way to go.
Nothing in your bedroom at night. So, but what are healthy boundaries for phone and text use?
Before we speak to that, Paul, I want to just affirm something you said and say, I did the exact same thing. I can remember writing down things I wanted to talk to a girl about on the phone as well, because I'd get so nervous and, the emotions would take over and I couldn't access, rational thoughts. And I have encouraged a lot of boys, back to the example we talked about of I feel so overwhelmed in the dinner conversation, to put 3 questions in their phone. And if you get really stuck in the conversation, say, could you excuse me when I run to the restroom? Pull those up on your phone. It's like, okay, I've got 3 to 5 open-ended questions that I can go back to the table with and help move the conversation forward. So I wanted to throw that out before we talk about how to limit the phone. I do think there's great ways we can use technology to help in this space of dating, which is useful. But I would only next say, I think back to the headset conversation we shared. I am concerned that boys are using that vehicle to do a lot of their communicating with girls, and it just creates a lot of opportunity for them to say things they'd never say face to face.
Technology. You don't mean headsets necessarily.
No, technology, yes. Where they're just doing so much communicating through technology that it's like, I can say really, whether it's risky sexual things, whether it's too much emotional intensity as we've been discussing, but it's just convenient for a lot of that to happen in that space. I had a great dad who said to his son years ago, hey, buddy, 80% of what you're putting in text to your girlfriend, you really should be writing in a journal. And then about 20% would be good for you to say. And I'm going to help you figure that balance out. We're going to literally sit down with some of your texts and figure out. And in the he hated that exercise, this boy did, but in the rereading, saying some of those things out loud, he realized, even when I speak it, I should not have said that.
Yeah.
And his dad said, and let's not lose sight of the fact that her dad may read this too. So if her dad's reading this out loud, you really don't want it in text.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to talk about that too, how much we should be checking in, how much we should know about the relationship in a second. What do you think, Sissy, healthy boundaries with phone and text messages?
Well, I think we need them anyway, regardless. And if we already have those things in place, I don't know that, if we're already checking, in the beginning, we want to be checking their text, making sure we have access to social media frequently. And then the more they prove themselves responsible, it's that we let the rope out, pull it back in when they mess up, as they will. And a lot of kids are sending photos that they have no business sending, all of those things. And they're hearing about it. They're hearing why they shouldn't, even at schools, which is great. But at the same time, it's still happening. And so maybe even when you have let the rope out because your child has been great with friends in terms of technology, you go ahead and say, hey, we're going to spend a little less time, or we're going to divide up the pie on how much you can be texting him / FaceTiming him versus your friends. Because again, I don't want you to lose yourself in this relationship. But I would start always with kids to say, tell me what you think is healthy. Because, I mean, it's kind of like when you say, what do you think is a fair consequence? A lot of times kids are harder on themselves than we would even be on them.
Right.
But as every conversation like that, where we're saying, I don't want you to lose yourself. I want you to maintain friendships. I want there to be some pacing. What do you think's healthy? We're setting the reminders of pacing and not losing themselves, even when we're not lecturing on that. Okay. So, but I do think we want to be checking more when they're moving into that place, because they may text completely different than they did with their friends. They may need more boundaries around timing on that.
Yeah. So let's move into our final, the fifth bucket, like how much authority should we have over the process? How much should we inject ourselves into the process? Speaking of texts and social media apps, I mean, I tell my kids, you have to tell me your password to your phone. And if I don't have it, I'm going to take it, because we're paying for it. It's not like it's my phone. You know, I try not to be so authoritative about it, but I say, look, I need accountability partners. I'm an almost 50-year-old woman, right? So we are your accountability partners as well. Just know I will know your password and I will be checking. I won't tell you when I'm going to be checking, but just know it's an accountability for my kids. And some people think that breaks trust, but I'm very forthright about it. I know your password. Just, I'm going to be checking, so my daughter can't get mad, because I've already told her, I told you I'm going to check it. You know, not all the time, but I'm going to check it. And if trust is broken, I'm going to be checking it more. But if that trust takes time to rebuild, if the trust has been rebuilt, I won't be checking it as often. What do you think about parents checking their phones? Because I know we had a lot of questions about snooping versus trusting. I trust my kids, but I'm also going to hold them accountable.
Yes, and yes.
Amen.
We are jumping up and down and cheering.
Yes, we are.
And I keep going back to the driving analogy. Treat it like that year in the car. Like I'm giving you feedback, because of course you haven't learned these skills yet. And so I think it is necessary. I don't think we're supporting kids' development well when we don't. I really don't, because it's such a necessary skill set. And I would even go a step further, Paula. I was jumping up and down and cheering when you talked about the requirement of having a boy come meet you before he could ask her out, that he can't just text your daughter and say, I want to go out, and you all have never met this person.
Or say, I'm outside. I'm like, no, get out of your car and you come knock on the door. And you say hello to us.
I
had a great and hilarious dad say to his teenage daughter, she was like, Dad, that is so old school. No one else does that. And he was like, you know, sweetheart, that would be the equivalent of me letting a stranger wander up the driveway and just test drive my car. Like, I'm never going to let somebody that I've not met and know have access to a possession of mine that's valuable. You are my greatest possession. So, of course, I'm not going to hand you over to a person I've not had an experience of knowing and spending time with.
Right.
You're way more valuable than my vehicle is. But I love that he was trying to create some kind of concrete category of saying it's kind of the equivalent of that.
Right. Sissy, what do you think about, and this is where I think the area gets a little bit gray, like you can have your boundaries at home. Like for us, you're not allowed to have your significant other in your bedroom. It doesn't matter who, like you invite anybody into your bedroom and the temptation can take over. Yeah. And also if you have certain boundaries for yourself, like don't put yourself in a bad situation. So we say that, but I've heard from so many other parents, they're like, well, we don't know what goes on at the other parent's house. Like how much of our own parental authority can we implement or like exercise if they're going to the other person's house and their parents don't have any rules? Like where do we step in? What's healthy? What's unhealthy? I don't know how to handle that.
Yes. Well, a couple of things I would say on the front end is, one, it's great when you know the other family and can have communication with the other family. And if you don't, I think there is a way to be very self-effacing and call the other parent and say, okay, I'm a total nerd and we have our house almost on lockdown. And I'm just wondering, sometimes I think what your rules are can set them up to feel like we're assuming that they don't have the same kind of rules. But, you know, we don't let our kids, and then fill in the blank. And then if you're comfortable using the same guidelines, we would be so grateful.
Okay. So not in a, you're not in an accusatory manner. Like you're not flipping tables and saying, okay, I got you. That's good.
Yes. And I think when you're silly about it and self-effacing, it's going to be disarming in a way that they're not going to feel defensive.
So good. 2 more questions. How much can I know or ask about my son or daughter's relationship, and how much should I insert myself into the situation?
I think it's good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sissy, I want you to tell a story in a second about the family, including siblings, having some input.
Yes.
I think that's a really great one. But
Wow.
can I tell one funny story to your great question
You
that I
guys
love?
have time. I know you have to, we got to rock and roll. So I'm just trying
Okay,
to. Yeah,
perfect. I'll be quick. This hilarious mom I worked with years ago said they'd had an incident when their son had a little friend over and they built some forts, and there were a group of kids. And she came in to check in at one point. This is when they were toddlers, and they had taken some clothes off. Not all clothes, but a lot. And she was like, hey, we have a rule in our house. Doors open, clothes on, blankets off, like that. Those 3. And she said, when my kids became teenagers, I said the same rules apply for dating. Doors open, clothes on, blankets off. Because she came in one time and her son and the girlfriend had a blanket over, and she was like, blankets off, clothes on. So I thought,
great.
Isn't that great?
I like that.
Toddlers
My
and
husband
teenagers.
started hiding the blankets, by the way.
Good for him.
That's great too.
Good for
That's
him.
so good.
Oh my gosh.
Well, and the story has stayed with us because it's one of our favorite things we ever heard a parent say. We were teaching a parenting seminar and someone said, we have a red flag system in our home and it applies to everyone. And whenever someone brings someone home, even a friend, but certainly somebody they're interested in romantically, anybody in the family can say, red flag. And she said, we don't necessarily say why as they're older, but our hope is always that they'll say, tell me why.
Okay, I like that.
And how cool. I mean, I was thinking, David, even about your family and how David has an older daughter and younger twin sons, and how much coaching your daughter did with your fellas.
Yes,
You know,
a lot.
To have siblings speak into it can be really helpful.
Yes.
She had them fixing their hair and doing all kinds of things.
She did.
Caroline, our oldest, has already told JJ, she's like, JJ, if you ever do that to a girl, I'm going to kill you myself. So like,
See, that's so good.
coaching
So
him,
great.
telling him. So yeah, I like that, the red flag. And you don't have to reveal why, but then it makes it feel more of a family decision. And like you're all looking out for one another.
Yes.
And I think it's only appropriate to kind of end on this question. And this came from a couple of your listeners and viewers. They said, my parents didn't allow me to date. Thoughts on that? And another said, my mom made it limited, which made me want to be sneaky about it. So what about the parents that are hard and fast no dating? Talk about what that can look like. And again, you just heard from 2 listeners that said it kind of backfired in their family.
Yeah.
That is our experience. I think it makes it forbidden fruit, which is not what we want. And not only that, where we can create a situation where there's more subterfuge and they're just doing it underground, but also circling back to your language that I loved about skill developing. We are really hindering them from having an experience socially of skill developing. I was with my sister and brother-in-law the other day, and you will totally get this, Paula, but we were talking about how much we learned having to answer our phone and say, this is Goff's residence, this is Sissy, or whatever we were taught to say. I mean, just even the skill development of building basic blocks of how we have conversations with the opposite sex is so important.
Right.
And that's all happening in that development.
That's how much expectation are we placing on it?
Yes.
The expectation is look for quality people, build social skills, if that's the expectation.
Yeah.
Okay, I like that. David, and in closing, take us home.
Well, I would only add, I would even argue that if the parent who, is considering, I don't want him to date at all, would be open to thinking about the possibility of, even if it didn't go well, like let's say it was more clumsy than clean, I'd still argue there was great benefit because we want the learning to happen on our watch. We want kids to fall down and get back up where we can be there to support them. We don't want them doing this skill development for the first time miles away, states away when they're in college. I even say that to parents in our offices who have kids who are in a really hard place, to say, I'm sad with you, this is happening, and I'd rather it happen right now where there are grown-ups around them who can support them and know them and love them than being in a dorm alone. And we don't know who the grown-ups are at that point. So I think seeing it in that same way, if there's just good opportunity for practice and skill development.
This has just been so comforting. It's been a comforting conversation on a very uncomfortable topic that so many parents are navigating. And I'm so grateful to everybody who sent us questions. Thank you, because you guided this whole conversation. You gave us every question that was pretty much asked during this conversation. Thank you for answering these. I feel so much better and so much more informed and not as uncomfortable, but still a little bit uncomfortable. It's supposed to be a little uncomfortable, just like our kids asking somebody out is supposed to be uncomfortable. We're figuring it out, right?
Yes.
So thank you guys.
And Paula,
I love you so much.
You are doing a beautiful job in all the things on your podcast and just leading all of us into having hard, brave, honest, hopeful conversations. And so thank you for doing this with us, asking us to do it. We're so honored, and we love you and are so grateful for every time we get to intersect with you.
Oh, I love it. We need to take our show on the road sometime and do something bigger and dream bigger, because I just absolutely love working alongside the two of you. I think you're both brilliant, and I have such respect for the work you're doing.
Well, you too, friend.
All right. I love you guys.
You too, Paula. You're
so
the best.
Good to be with you.
Thanks so much for this. Appreciate it. Okay.
Of course. Bye.
Bye-bye. I know, guys, I had to admit that I was wrong. Total 180 for me on that. And now I want my kids to date in high school, but to date for two reasons. And I think, first of all, we have to have realistic expectations on these relationships, right? And our kids need to date, number one, to learn how to engage with the opposite sex. They're going to have to work in a work environment with the opposite sex. How are they going to carry on a conversation? So just to engage with the opposite sex is so important. Learn communicative skills and how to carry on a conversation. That's number one. That is a life skill. And number two, I thought it was so good. They need to learn how to not only attract, but require quality people in their life, how to discern between somebody I want in my life and somebody that's probably not good for me. That is another life lesson that our kids need to learn. So again, realistic expectations on these relationships. We know most relationships in high school don't end in marriage. Look, I married my college sweetheart. I do live in a town now where several of my friends did marry their high school sweetheart. So it happens, okay? So I'm not discounting it, but I'm just saying, per this conversation with David and Sissy, let's have realistic expectations and let's encourage our kids to date for those two reasons: to learn how to require quality people and discern quality people in their circle, and to learn how to have conversations, communicative skills with the opposite sex. Those are life skills. And some other really important things that Sissy and David brought up were boundaries and how involved the family can be. So boundaries are personal boundaries here in our home. No bedrooms, no blankets, okay? So as my husband says, no B's, the two B's, blankets and bedrooms. Don't be afraid to be old school either. I think our daughter has appreciated that. We have said, if they don't want to come to the door and meet your family, they're not worthy of you, right? They have to respect you and respect your family and get to know your family. Don't be afraid to share your personal experience with your teens too. I mean, I don't know how in depth you want to go, but don't be afraid to share your personal experience. And the family does have input. If there's some red flags, say, oh, I saw a red flag. But again, boundaries, appropriate pacing, and let's have realistic expectations on why they're dating in the first place for those two reasons that we keep mentioning. Okay, so I need you guys to hold me accountable on something. My girlfriends from college are coming in town at the end of this week, and we are trying on our wedding dresses. I mentioned earlier this month in that conversation with Peaches and Diesel when she was talking about trying on her wedding dresses with her friends and how much fun that was. I said, you know what, maybe we'll do it. I kind of put it out there. Well, I'm putting it out there again, so you all have to hold me accountable. We're going to do that this weekend. I promise that there will be some video evidence. There may or may not be a couple of glasses of wine involved, just so that we don't take ourselves too seriously, but it's going to be a really good time. And looking forward to that moment with my college girlfriends as we try on our wedding dresses. I haven't taken mine out of the box. It's still in the box 25 years later. So it should be a hoot. All right, next month, so excited to bring you a month-long series on the 5 love languages. The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman has been one of the most transformative books in my life in terms of all my relationships. He just wrote a follow-up book called The Love Language That Matters Most. So John and Dr. Chapman and I are going to be in conversation all month long, talking about the 5 love languages. And of course, we have to go there. Feels like every guy thinks that their primary love language is physical touch because they want sex. So Dr. Chapman is going to set the record straight on that one. But a whole lot of fun to be had as we talk about the 5 love languages all next month as we continue to talk about it. All right. I'll see you then, everybody. I know you guys thought you were done with me, but not quite yet. I have one more thing to tell you about. If you're watching on YouTube or you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to subscribe to the show. I don't want you to miss a single beat or a single conversation. And remember, my DMs are always open. Tell me what you want to talk about.